Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. I'm Annette Richmond, and I'm so excited to be here today with you, Toni. I met you on Clubhouse about a year ago, I think, and got to know you in Clubhouse rooms, and then learn more about you connecting on LinkedIn. So, for people who don't know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of who you are and what you do?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for having me in there. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you. And I think you might find that it was nearer on 2 years ago, Clubhouse, because LinkedIn Audio has been around for a year now. But yeah, I'm a critical friend and a business mentor, but I work specifically with social entrepreneurs and public interest causes. So a lot of my clients are typically, public sector, Barnardo's, Met Police, Mind, mental health, homelessness, so it's really, predominantly working with vulnerable groups, people that are serving those particular groups and socially conscious, which is the way that we need to move forward to make our businesses foolproof.
I love that, and I love the topic that you've chosen for today. And so it's business startup for social entrepreneurs. So based on looking at your LinkedIn profile and talking to you, I think I know what you mean by all this. But can you just sort of clarify and expand on what that means?
Okay, social entrepreneur, it might be somebody who has, I hear a lot of people refer to it as a passion project. They want to supply, food for the needy or those living beyond the poverty line, or provide housing options for those that are at risk of being homeless. So it's those types of causes. They can sometimes sit under the charity umbrella, and but it's really a public interest cause, something that is of public interest and that doesn't necessarily sit within a statutory service. So a lot of them are non-profit making or charity, but there are people that are coming through that have some really good ideas in the private sector and making, profit from it. So that's really what it's about.
So is it because I've worked a little bit for nonprofits in my past. That's how I landed in the career field in the first place. I was working at a nonprofit training and placement facility. And the work that they were doing there, it was actually a service for the chronically mentally ill. And so they, people had to apply and come to that. And they were, I always say they were the most dedicated clients that I ever worked with. I mean, so I see it from the nonprofit and people that worked for that company, even people who worked in accounting, they did work for that company because they wanted to work sort of for that cause and in that space.
Yeah, and their heart's in it. Their heart's in it. It's kind of like, sometimes it's not necessarily driven by the finance, but it's driven by the need and the cause. But I find that those people, especially over the last few years, Annette, they've been moving into this area more, maybe because they didn't feel valued in the workplace, or there's a situation that has happened and they want to go out and make, help more people in that situation. So they're moving into those spaces of helping, whether it be mental well-being or DEIB or human-centered things. And my background is criminal justice specialist education and care. So for a lot of my time, over 30 years, I spent in those services. So I understand it really well. And I can see it on both sides as well. So it just makes sense that I'm helping people to identify where the gaps are and plug some of those gaps and show them how to make money. If money's your thing and you need to make money out of your passion project, then because I think that there is this stigma as well that you have to do it for free, and you shouldn't ask for money. It's money is a dirty word, but actually there's a way that you can do it. And so that's really what my whole message is around.
Can you expand on that a little? Because, I do agree with you. I mean, a lot of people, even people in my business, for example, we are doing this. Part of the reason is because we want to help people and help people move forward. But again, we have to pay the rent. So can you expand a little bit on maybe how people need to shift their thinking a bit?
Well, when I work with people in this area, I start with purpose, because what is a life without purpose? And if you found your purpose, then all you're doing is working and living within that. So it's your passion, and the payment for that in return is where it comes together. And I encourage people to think about their purpose, the ikigai. And when you think about the ikigai, which is a Japanese concept for purpose, yeah.
Oh,
Reason for
okay.
being, IKIGAI. If anyone's watching and wants to look it up, and think about your ikigai. But then if you put it together, sorry, I do all the hand signals as well, Annette, so you just get used to me.
I love it.
Put it together with the purpose Venn diagram, which has got the 4 quadrants. And those 4 quadrants are: what do I love? What am I good at? What can I be paid for? And what does the world need? So really, when you think about those 4 questions in isolation, you really start examining what you're really good at, what you're drawn to, and what does the world need. Then you think, well, actually, is that something I can be paid for? Mm-hmm. And then, when you move those around until you get to the sweet spot in the middle, then that's the starting point. And then you start thinking about, well, actually, because a lot of people have this as a side hustle. I don't particularly like that term, because for me, a side hustle tends to stay on the side. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it doesn't grow into a full-time business, and people think, oh, it's just a way to generate extra money. But I like to think of it as, if this is going to sustain you, if it's going to keep you, if it's going to pay your bills, then you need to move it from a side hustle hobby into that space and look at how it can become sustainable. And so you start thinking, once you've got your purpose, you bring the financial, the money aspect in it. How much do I need to be generating from this service? And when the two come together, that's a starting point for a beautiful way forward.
So I absolutely love this, and I will be rewatching this, because this is an excellent lesson for me too. And I want to also, because you are really a powerful voice for DEIB inclusion and on LinkedIn and elsewhere, which is part of what kind of drew me to you. And I'd like you to sort of talk a little bit about that. I will say that based on my personal experience, it seems kind of like the lack of, inclusivity is based on people just not knowing people who are not like them. And they tend to think of people who are not like them as like the other people. And, I'm grateful the fact that I grew up with parents in 2 different religions. I went to a majority schools my entire education, and it gave me the opportunity to know people who were different than me. And I think that when people don't have that opportunity, that's when that sort of barrier exists, if you will. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, well, my own personal journey is that I actually used to chair my residents association. And in the process of doing that over 30 years ago, what that done for me was there was somebody in the community that actually died in police custody. And so as the chair of that residents association, I felt obliged and was helping and supporting that particular family. And the more I was reading the reports and everything, there was all this jargon in there. I didn't understand it. I was going to professionals to explain it in layman's terms. But I found that was my first start of the journey, because I wanted to delve deeper. So I studied law, and I went into community safety, applied criminology and community safety, applied criminology and youth justice. So that was where I started my journey. And I really got interested in behavior, how people behaved. I remember from school loving sociology and social studies, and remember the story about the baby that grew up with a monkey and acted everything out like the monkey. I was really fascinated by that. That was the start of my journey. I then trained to become a magistrate, even though I didn't follow that through. as a profession, but it really says a lot about me because I like to hear from everybody, and then I make my own informed, decision or conclusion. But I wanted to experience that. But it really took me into a world of working with the Ministry of Justice, the police service, and really trying to understand the different behaviours, innate, taught, learned, habitual behaviour, what they mean, where they come from. Because while I was studying about young people in the criminal justice system, I wanted to understand what their journey was to get there. And it was a lot of it was embedded in how they were brought up. And so when I done that, I wanted to understand at that point that, okay, so we understand behavior now. If we want to change behavior, what do? We need to relearn, unlearn and relearn. So I went into education. I was a principal of special educational needs provisions, autism, dyslexia, all sorts of other disabilities, PMLD, etc. And for me, it was about understanding how people engage in that learning through kinesthetic, audio and visual learning.
Okay.
And if you didn't understand that, then what it meant was that if the teachers didn't understand the behavior, it meant that children were going to be in detention forevermore, because they needed to understand that a behavior cannot necessarily be changed just like that. Mm-hmm. Then it took me into a world of the care setting, because I wanted to understand how environmental factors have an impact on learning. So I've got this three-pronged approach, which covers the whole of my career, out of curiosity, out of research. I moved from behavior, innate, taught, learnt, habitual, to learning, kinesthetic, audio and visual, to environment. And that's how I get to understand the difference in people, what people need, and how it can be a catalyst to change. I know that was very wordy, but
I really do appreciate that. And I have always been interested in people's behavior myself, which is why I ended up going back and getting a master's in psych, which is how I ended up in the career field in the first place. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think the whole, DEI, DEIB, for some people, it feels like it's kind of a newish thing that, is just sort of coming into people's awareness over the last, I don't know, maybe several years or a few years. But you have been working in that for over a decade. And so
a decade, 30 years I've been in there. A decade, that's really kind of you. But 30 years, because in the UK we had a particular case, and it was of a young black man that died in a racist attack, and actually the Metropolitan Police, which are the police in London, were found not to have investigated it properly. So that was over 30 years ago, and there was an inquiry, and the police had training, of which I was a part of delivering some of that training. So it almost feels as if we've gone full circle in that time, in that 30 years. I know I only look 21, but yes, that was 30 years ago.
No, it is also interesting to me. And, we are finally, I think, coming around to that more as a society here. Thank goodness that things are changing.
Well, I think that's part that what's happened is the situation that happened in America, in the US a few years ago with George Floyd, that has kind of really propelled it to the forefront of everybody's minds.
Yes, and things are changing, not as quickly as I would like to see, and others, most others really, but are moving in the right direction. But can you, because I know you also work with businesses, so can you expand on a little bit of how inclusivity is so important and critical for businesses?
Wow, where do I start, and how long have
Wherever
you got?
You like.
Okay, so I mean, it is just so important, and I mean, I think the best way for me to explain this, Annette, is really to think about it as if you're an established business, because I work with three different categories: an established business, a startup business, and people that are wanting to get into these leadership board roles in these organizations. So I think about it as a compassionate business or a compassionate organization, of which is driven by 4 areas. And those 4 areas are corporate social responsibility, DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, SDG, which is sustainable development goals, and there are 17 of those, which are about equality, all sorts of different things, well-being, etc. And also ESG, which is about how you're going to get funding into your non-profit and how you govern your finances. So those 4 key areas, and I think about the 4 Ps, and those 4 Ps are purpose. What is the purpose of this organization? People, compassionate leadership, planet. Are you a considerate organization that's thinking about sustainable development? And P, the last P, for profit or performance. If it's a non-profit, it's performance that you're measuring. So I look at it as those 4 areas and those 4 Ps, of which DEIB is one part of the bigger picture, but they're all interlinked. They're all interlinked.
No, I think that is so important. I mean, and as I've been looking a lot lately because I just did a show on where we had a panel and we were talking about hiring trends and how things have changed and companies have changed as the pandemic. One of the big things that came out of it was the shift in employee values and what they are looking for, and the idea of having a company culture for many, that is more important to them than salary. Not that they're going to work for nothing, but that is really, really such an important component to them. And I mean, do you see that as so that the shift?
Absolutely, because I think what we've all gone through is a great resignation, the digital era, and people feeling a bit misplaced. Do they fit? Do they actually belong? So this is really it's key, isn't it? And I think a lot of the times I have these conversations with leaders, and they feel that they're the staff in their organizations, the workforce, they feel that feeling valued is about getting paid more. When actually, you know what it's like. You don't always have the budget, but there's other ways to make people feel as if they're important, acknowledged, and you want people to feel valued. So ask them, how can we value you? Take money out of the equation. Yes, you need to be paid what you're worth, but and that is really at the bottom of it. To be honest with you, that's the starting point, isn't it? If you take money out of the equation, what do you want us to do to make you feel valued?
Oh, it is so true. One of my last corporate positions, I was working for a publishing company, and that's one of the things that they did with us, the employees, is they gave us a choice of things that were not necessarily, a bonus or something related. And what would you like? What would you appreciate? And based on what the feedback they got, that's what they decided to give us. And I have read, as I'm sure you have, that for a lot of people, just getting a thank you.
Absolutely. Even a thank you, even if it's like, Annette, I really appreciate that piece of work that you've done. You've done a fantastic job today. Just, an acknowledgement of the work that they've done. And there are some leaders that feel that, well, they're getting paid and that's enough. Well, actually, we're all people. And, just acknowledging them. And when I've led people, I have come to the conclusion that if I spend 80% of my time on people, and 20% on the work that only I can do, then we're good. Because if I don't get my head around the fact that the people are my work, then there's always going to be a problem. I can't hide off in the corner in my office somewhere and sneak about and not be seen, because so it's really important that when you book supervisions, you book these things, that you don't cancel, you don't let them down. They are the first that you serve. And quite often I find that then they help me with my work too.
Oh, yes. And, and one thing, and I'd like your thoughts on this, because I think it also takes into the consideration the idea of making people feel valued. A lot of the clients that I work with are, very senior level executives, and a lot of them share the philosophy that they want the people that work for them, work with them to understand what their work, how it contributes, what their place is, and how what they're doing is moving the company towards its goals. So it's not just, do this, do that, without sort of the why behind it.
Well, and that's why I was saying about those 4 pieces, the 4 Ps. Yeah, because it's a combination of all of those. And if you're going to be future proofing your business, that's the way that you need to incorporate all of those. Because if we look at the pandemic and what's happened, a lot of businesses didn't make it. Some had to restructure and things like that. So this is about, how can you make good? How can you be 8 years ahead of your competitors by thinking about sustainable development? How can you get on top of your finances by really being accountable for your ESG and the way that you manage your stakeholders? So for me, I think that it's really embedded. It's a big part of all of it, and it's certainly the way that we need to move forward.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. So what do you enjoy best about what you do?
I like it when people are happy, when they share their good news with me. I know it sounds really simple, but I get messages and it's like, sometimes people just call me and they're just sharing something great, and I'm there with them. I'm happy for them. And part of what I do is about creating some of that happiness too, because you want to get somebody from a place where they're not smiling to smiling. And we're going to kind of think about it in simple terms. That's really where we want them to be, isn't it?
Yes.
And I enjoy their joy. And sometimes when they share it with me, I feel as if it's happening to me. And then I come down and I remember that it's not me, it's them. Do you understand what I mean? It's like, I'm as happy as they are. Then it's like, oh, I've got to come back down, and they can stay there. But it really is joyful. It makes my heart feel warm, and it makes me feel really happy when I'm helping others to find their own joy as well. And to be honest with you, Annette, I kind of look at it this way. I remember that when I was learning to drive, I was working with a company that had a company car sitting gathering dust in this warehouse. So I was learning to drive, and I said to this instructor, "You've got to get me through." And the first day I said, "How did I do?" And he said to me, and he made this face, and I realized that I hadn't done very well. But by time, as things have progressed, there was a time where he was sitting in the passenger seat, and at the end of the lesson I said, "How did I do?" And he said to me, "Well, you'll be really pleased to know that I didn't use any emergency pedals at all. You done it all on your own." And the joy that I had that day, I felt so empowered. And so I remember that day, even though it was so long ago, over 30 years ago, I remember that day and how I felt. And so when I'm working with clients, I try to get them to that space where, first of all, I'm driving, they're in the passenger seat. Then I move to the passenger seat and they're driving. We're both driving together. And then from there, they're driving, I'm in the passenger seat, and from there, I'm not in the car at all. Yeah. So in my mind, they're the different stages I want to, because I remember how I felt at that time, and I want to replicate that with the people I work with.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I love that story. Thank you for sharing it. And, it's funny how we remember those things. I remember the first client ever that I worked with on her resume. And I remember like it was yesterday, sitting in the parking lot, waiting to go in and get my haircut. And I got an email from her saying, "Oh, thank you so much. I love it." And I remember that was, almost 10 years ago. And I remember it. And you have those times when people, and this was someone who was, she had gone through some hard times. She was a young widow, and I was just so excited to be able to help her. And I think that while employers don't realize often how much a thank you means to their employees, when we are working with people and they just say, "You know what, thank you, this is, I've gotten a job," or something, and people don't, I really appreciate that. And I'm sure you do as well.
Absolutely. And it means a lot. It makes them happy, and it makes you feel happy too. And and again, in terms of, you're talking about value and thanking people, and if we're going to kind of move back to the space of social entrepreneurship and starting out, that is really, you know, people that are starting a business in a social space of a good cause, or maybe a public cause. And when they're doing that, you know, they're doing that because they want to do better, they want to contribute more. And these are kind of some of the things that they want to be able to show moving into the business. So really having that sense of purpose, sitting in your purpose, and having a purposeful business as well that can sustain itself is and these things we've talked about are foundational. You know, is your business attached to one of the sustainable development goals? Is it about well-being? Is it about good quality education? What is it? Is it about employment opportunities and the economy? So really just making sure that your business is aligned with in that way, and it makes such a difference to the success or not. And when you're thinking about working with vulnerable groups, safeguarding as well is very high on the agenda. And these are all areas that I happen to know about. So that's me out there.
No, I love that. And, you know, I so appreciate what you have shared in our time together. And as it's drawing to a close, I'd like to ask you, because we've talked about, you know, I've asked you about some things, and you've shared a lot. Is there anything that, you know, that we haven't discussed that you think is important and you would like to sort of have a final thought on now?
Only that if there's anyone that's watching and they feel it in their heart that they should be doing something different, then really go and explore it. You know, there are so many people that are unhappy in their roles. Find a new role, get out of it. You know, it's not, you know, if you want to fight, but don't let that drain your energy. And I just think that life is just so short. Life is so precious. Make a move if that's what you want to do. There's lots of help out there. There's coaches, there's consultants, there's mentors like myself. Happy to help you. Get some help and off you go. And it's time to feel fulfilled and follow your passion.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And where can people find you? On LinkedIn and elsewhere? Where?
Yeah, they'll find me on LinkedIn quite easily. Toni McLelland. On Instagram, it's all Toni McLelland. Wherever you go, it's Toni McLelland, MSc, so you can recognize me. Yeah, I'm there. Drop me a message, connect, follow, and these are the messages I'm putting out in the world, and around compassionate leadership and being a more compassionate leader, and empowering and inspiring others.
Well, that you do. I will say you certainly inspire me. I admire what you do so much. So thank you so much for saying yes when I invited you. It's been such a treat chatting with you. For everyone else out there, thank you for being with us. I've seen some reactions in the audience, and have a great rest of your day. And I will see you back here next week.
Bye. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Bye for now.